Mary Dudley, and I'm the Director of Education here at the Civic Garden Center. And today we're going to be talking about the basics of compost. First, we're going to discuss soil health. Our soils are important, and their structure and the amount of nutrients that they hold matters when we're trying to grow certain things. We need to think about the pH, the ability of that soil to retain moisture, and how healthy it's able to keep our plants, because the different nutrients that plants need, the essential nutrients that plants require for growth, are going to be found in these soils. And so we want healthy soil to be able to feed healthy gardens. How do you know if you have healthy soil or not? You can start out with a simple soil shake test. I dug up some soil from one of our gardens here at the Civic Garden Center, and I filled it in this jar until it was about halfway. And then I added water to that sample, and I took a lot of time to shake this jar. Several minutes. The idea then is that we would let this jar settle out, and you would be able to see the different layers in the soil. There are three main components in soil: sand, silt, and clay. I've also listed those elements in order of their size. Sand is big and sinks to the bottom first. Silt kind of hangs out in the middle, and those clay particles tend to go towards the top of your sample. Now, they won't be all the way at the top of the jar because that's where things float. And so at the top of your jar, you'll be able to see organic matter, roots, leaves, things like that. Soils here in Cincinnati can be a little bit heavy in clay, which means that we need to add things to our soil so that they are able to drain properly and they don't hold too much water for our plants. So if you do your soil shake test and you find that you have a significant layer of clay in your soil, you'll want to make sure that you're adding something to that. A wonderful way for us to be able to do that is by composting. Compost is something that happens naturally in our environment all the time. There's a reason why we're not swimming around in leaves, because they decompose over time. The act of composting for a gardener is trying to harness that natural process to produce something that we can add to our soils to make them healthier. So let's say you just had a nice day in the garden and you have some things that you would like to compost. What am I composting? Weeds that are not going to seed. I can compost leaves. I can compost little pieces of mulch or small sticks. If you have anything quite large, you're going to want to break that up. The increased surface area means that our microorganisms that are decomposing these elements are able to work a little bit faster. And so it's a good idea to cut things up smaller when you can. So I have some things that I collected as I was gardening, and these are ready for compost. However, I did find something that should not go in my compost. Not everything is compostable. So this little candy wrapper is going to have to go in the trash. But these leaves and the other things that I have from my garden, or an extra apple core or banana peel as I might have left over from lunch, those things can go in my compost. We are not able to efficiently compost things like meat and dairy and oils outside in our backyard composting systems. So it's really a good idea to stick to plant material that's coming out of your garden or might be coming from a salad or your lunch. While these materials would naturally break down on their own, I can make the whole process more efficient by putting them in a compost pile. A compost pile does not have to be complicated. It can literally just be a pile that you put things into. But if you really want to make it more efficient, you want that composting to kind of heat up quickly and you want it to become something that you want to use in your garden, there are things you can do to make it more efficient. One of the things that you can do is you can increase the volume. So instead of just kind of throwing everything off to the side, you can actually build a wire bin. This is an example of a wire bin system that keeps things together so that you have this kind of crucial volume. 3 by 3 by 3 is the recommended minimum volume for active compost. You can go wire bin, you could get fancy with a tumbler, you could build a 3-bin system like this one over here. There are lots of different ways to increase that volume so that you're able to get that core nice and warm and be a good habitat for microorganisms. Really what we're trying to do in the compost pile is create a habitat for decomposers. We want those fungi and those microorganisms and those small invertebrates to be able to help us out and break all these things down. After you've chosen a place to put your compost, you'll want to start adding materials. You want to add those in a balance. So what I have today is quite dry and brown, right? So I have all these leaves. These dry leaves are considered a carbon-based material. Wet things like food scraps or fresh weeds are going to be considered nitrogen-based materials. You need to balance your nitrogen and your carbon materials to have healthy compost. You only want about 25% nitrogen to 75% carbon. So when you are adding your wet, leafy green materials, you really want to have a carbon source close by. That could be shredded cardboard, newspaper, dried leaves, wood chips, something that you're going to be able to balance out all of that nitrogen with. The challenge is that if you get too much nitrogen in your pile, it might get very wet, which can make it compressed, and then it could become anaerobic. Anaerobic composting in your backyard is not ideal. It can be smelly and it can attract rodents. You really don't want that in your pile. So if you are adding a balance, every time you put in some greens, you also put in 3 times as much carbon, then you're really going to have a nice balanced pile. Another really important aspect of composting is aeration. These piles should be aerobic. We should have airflow happening in our compost pile, which is good for all of those microorganisms, decomposers that we want to thrive. This is a turning fork, and so you can get into your compost and you can flip it up and you can add some air into your compost. It's a very important step, especially when we have these wet springs. You want to be turning your compost so that you make sure that you don't have pockets of anaerobic activity. So I've got my compost cooking, I've got a spot for it, I'm adding my nitrogen and my carbon in good ratios, I'm turning. How can I tell that my compost is really working? Well, if you want, you can actually get a compost thermometer. This thing is long. It goes right into the middle of your compost pile and you're able to analyze the temperature. Compost piles should get up to about 140 degrees. 150 is even better if you can get there. But at that temperature, you are killing any weed seeds that might be popping up, and you're also reducing the possibility that there might be contamination in your compost, in your finished product. It can be challenging to get your pile to be that hot. So it is exciting when it happens. You can test it out on your thermometer. But if you're not getting your pile that hot, it's okay. You're still doing a good job composting. It just means that you'll want to use that compost for areas of your garden where you are not eating from. You could use that compost for flowers or trees, but you wouldn't want to put it necessarily in a garden where you're going to be planting carrots or spinach after that. So after a while of turning and balancing and seeing what temperature your compost is, you might be ready to harvest some. And if you're always adding to your compost pile, there's always going to be some compost that's not finished. And that's okay. You can remove that unfinished compost as you do a screening process. So this is a screen. This is how we screen our compost. So I'll lay this on top of the wheelbarrow and I will put finished compost or almost finished compost in it. And I'll use my hands with gloves on to push what I can through the grid here. And what falls through is sifted, is finished compost. What doesn't fall through, the kind of bigger pieces that aren't finished composting, we'll put back in the compost to keep working. So it's a really good idea to sift through your compost. It also gives you an opportunity to check for anything that might be in there that you didn't want in there, like rubber bands or those little produce stickers or anything like that. So it's good to be able to sift through your compost and find out what it's looking like. When you have sifted through your compost, hopefully you'll have something that looks a lot like this. This is beautiful finished compost. When you're ready to use compost in your garden, you want to incorporate it into the planting area. For example, if you are preparing a bed to grow some spinach seeds, you'll want to incorporate this compost in before you plant those seeds. You would lay some compost on top of the soil, and then you can use a shovel to mix it in. You could leave it on top of the soil, but a lot of that organic material might not make it into where the root zone is, so you do want to put it in where the roots are going to go, if possible. I like to add compost to all of my garden beds in the fall, in the late fall, after I've done harvesting, and then I let the critters, the worms, do the mixing for me. So they go up and down and all around, and they mix that compost up, and then during springtime I'm able to start planting in my garden that has soil that is healthy because it has good structure, it has added compost and nutrient availability. We'd be happy to talk to you about your unique composting needs. Feel free to reach out to us at the Civic Garden Center.